So Barcelona is starting. That's right, guys. We have the pre-regional qualifier that is going to be happening today. And then tomorrow we have the first regional qualifier itself for Vendetta. So we're going to be going into a tier list of sorts, but we're going to be saying what could possibly be making the finals, what could make top 8 day 2, what's a wild card option, and what might just be a metal card hunter. That's right, we're going to be making our predictions on what could possibly be winning Vendetta, the regionals in Barcelona. All of that and more is starting right now. This is something that's just fun for me to be able to do, you know, because we do have a good idea of where the meta is at, but at the same time, the biggest thing that ends up happening is what happens when you put pilot skill with a top tier deck. And there's some teams out there that are just absolutely insane when it comes to their skill levels and things like that. You know, we're looking at Alan ZQ, Prismaticism, Diwali, all them have been able to do so much with their resumes and have a very great run with their competition, making multiple top 8s, and even like Alan ZQ making multiple championships. So really cool to be able to see a lot of that. So that's going to be a big deciding factor in some of this. But even still, while we are making this list, there's some fun that we are going to be having with this, because again, at the end of the day, it is a tier list and all thoughts are my own, and I definitely don't know everything. I actually know very little, but I'm entertaining enough for you guys to be able to watch, so that's good, right? Hopefully. With that being said, though, we're going to have a lot of fun with this, because I think there are going to be some real fun surprises and predictions that we are going to be able to make, and I think that this is going to be one of the most exciting regional qualifiers that we have had to date, because I don't know, there's just something about the Vendetta meta. First off, that's really fun to say, but there's something about the Vendetta meta that is different, that feels really good, and it is such a breath of fresh air. You can tell, I mean, just how excited I am about this in general. Now, first and foremost, it's been just such a crazy shift that we've been able to have, where we've gone from a very thin meta to now a very wide meta, and that's something that is very interesting, that the aggro style of decks, the go wide decks, are having their day in the sunlight a little bit more. I mean, and we've been seeing things, you know, like Rek'Sai, Rengar, Azir be able to perform, even though they did have their comebacks and their days in the sun, in the previous sets and things like that. Especially Azir had, their regional qualifier win and things like that. So, but all the same, they weren't necessarily like, this is the tech that is taking us to the top in this case, and we've seen like a rise up of Draven again, and things like that. We've seen even a little bit of a fall of Diana, which is really interesting. And then of course we have new legends from Vendetta like Kennen. Mel has a lot of hype around her too, just because allegedly Alan ZQ is going to be piloting that. We'll still see. I have my kind of doubts about it. He could be, kind of making people think that he is going to be going for Mel and then just comes in with a completely different deck. That's more so what I'm thinking, but we'll see. Now, with that being said, the way that this tier list is going to be working is that we have the 6 different topics. First off is going to be dead. Now, I'm not to say that these aren't going to be seen in the regional qualifier at all, but you're not going to be able to get your metal card anymore with these legends here. Now, when you go to an actual regional championship, they're going to have the alt-art versions of these, with the caveat that you have to make day 2, which is insane. So if you're wanting to take Jinx and risk that, if you're wanting to take Ahri and risk trying to make day 2, you might, oh gosh, that is going to be absolutely crazy to be able to consider, and all, I'm just hyped about that in and of itself. So, with that being said, though, then we also have like the Metal Hunters, where you're not going to be winning. You're not even going to win. You're going to probably try to get your 4 to 5 wins to then lock in on a metal card and call it good. Then on top of that, we have the wild cards, the ones that, could actually have a really good surprise. The odds of them making the top 8 is very, very, very slim, kind of like what we saw with the Darius, where suddenly Darius was able to make a top 8 and we're like, wait, what? And that was in Unleashed. So, that kind of surprise there, where you're just like, oh, wait, wow, they actually have kind of an outlying chance to be able to make it. Then we have day 2, top 8, and in the finals. Now, in the finals doesn't necessarily mean that there is only going to be 2, but we could have a couple that are going to be making it there. So again, like I said, all thoughts are my own, and if you have any thoughts or disagreements or things like that, go ahead and let me know down in the comments below. So first and foremost, we're going to be starting off with the first 3. I'm going to be saying wild card for Kai'Sa, Master Yi, and Annie. Now, the biggest reason why I am saying wildcard for these 3 in particular is because they are still powerful enough in Vendetta that people who just want to make day 2 or try to get their top 64 invite are going to be potentially bringing this. The one in particular is going to be Master Yi, and I still think that there are going to be competitors that do take this deck. I would have been one of them at this point because I would just be shooting for my top 64, and even if, you know, I did take something like an Azir would be my backup choice in this, or Rengar. Those are the 3 that I've been playing this set. And, you know, that would be the one that I would be kind of aiming for at this point and trying to make my top 64 because of how powerful of a deck that it still is. The problem is, though, when there isn't a metal card that is able to be won, I think the representation is going to be much lower. And if the representation is then much lower, the chances of making top 8 or being in the finals is going to be really slim. Honestly, if Master Yi still had a metal card, or I thought that he was going to have a much higher representation, I would be putting him in top 8. I would still be sticking Annie and Kai'Sa in wild card all the same, but Master Yi would definitely be in my top 8, potentially even in the finals. I still think that he is one of the best decks of this set, and one that you are hopefully not necessarily, I mean, it's weird because we're only seeing really one guy play Master Yi at our locals. Everyone else is on completely different stuff, which is just crazy to be able to think. Now, Victor was one that I kept debating on whether it's going to be wild card or dead. Yellow has had a really big climb in power and really has fit into this meta well. And Victor is no exception of that. Now, all the same, though, I still don't think that he is going to necessarily have much representation that is going to be able to really make it through. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. But all things considered, I think that this is going to be just a lot of fun to be able to see how many Victors show up and how many of like the set 1 legends and proving grounds still show up at this regionals. And I think that could be also very eye-opening. Now, next is going to be a Rumble. Rumble, I think, is gonna be a wild card. There's been a couple of tournaments so far in this set where Rumble's been able to have a pretty decent showing, surprisingly enough. Now, the thing that is the hard part and why it's still going to be a wild card is because, again, the representation is not going to be there by any means. That's going to be the big thing. And that's going to be the hard part, is when you don't have a lot of representation, you could be a deck that has a very good chance of making it into that top 8 break. But if you have like 4 people or 10 people who are playing your deck and compared to, you know, over 2,000 people, good luck. You know, that you're trying to defy the odds at that point. And there still is that chance, but it's a much lower chance compared to the Aurelia, which is probably going to be one of the most brought decks, and you just heighten that of how many are going to be able to break through that threshold, you know. Percentages, math, all that jazz. Cool. Now, next, of course, is going to be Lucian. I think that he is still going to be a metal card hunter. He's very interesting because I want Lucian to be good. I love this guy so much, and he has so much potential, but just hasn't necessarily ever been able to get that final leg. See, he has kind of the same issue with that Akali ends up having too, where you're just going to be going in and you don't have a whole lot of defense, and that's where you're going to be really falling short. So as much as I love Lucian, I just don't necessarily think that he is going to be in a spot to be able to make it with the metal card hunting at this point. So next, of course, though, we have Draven, and Draven is an interesting one. Now, we'll at least start by putting him in day 2 while we talk about him a little bit. Draven has made a comeback. He never necessarily was supposed to leave in Unleashed, but I think everyone just got kind of burnt out playing him and playing against him, that he fell to the wayside. And I mean, yeah, he did lose a little bit of power when it came to the the bans and everything like that, but rightfully so. But he still had a really good win rate. I remember when I went to Hartford and the regional right before Hartford, Draven ended up having a 55-56% win rate in general, and it was one of my losses at Hartford. That was sad, though, too, just because I couldn't find if I had a Defy, I would have won the game, but did not see a single Defy game 3, unfortunately. But that's another, that's for my therapist, not for you guys. Now, even with all that, though, Draven has made its comeback here and is ready to roll. It's tough, though, because I don't think that it's going to be enough to make, like, a top 8, necessarily. I do think that it might be able to, make the top 64. I think we're going to add that. Let's add that. I think that it has a good chance of making that top 64. It making top 8 has the potential, but sometimes its matchups, it has some really bad matchups that could still really throttle it in this point. So I think that top 64 is going to be something to be keeping an eye on. Top 8, I would be surprised probably to see 1. You get that one Draven that was able to perform exceptionally well. It gets into the top 8, calls it good. Now, Rek'Sai, top 8. I think Rek'Sai has the potential to be top 8, potentially also in the finals. Rek'Sai is just in a really good spot right now, and especially when Rek'Sai wins the die roll and is able to go first, game 1, game 3, you just have such an advantage because you are automatically pretty much guaranteed to be able to utilize the legend ability of looking at the top 2 cards and being able to play one. That is protecting your hand so much more and giving you so much power and versatility at the same time. If you're seeing a card that you flip up and you're like, guess what? That card's not really good for this state in the game. That's more for mid to late game, or I'm already at late game. I don't need an early game card. And it goes to the bottom of the deck. That's the type of advantage that you really want to be able to utilize. Yes, little bit casino rolly, kind of thing, but not nearly as much as like what you would see like with Kennen Hook or something like that. Rek'Sai is still going to be able to have the strategy, the consistency that has the potential to make the finals. Rek'Sai is right on the cusp of making the finals there, I think. But I don't know if that it's going to be able to really make its impact there. Next, of course, I think is going to be Ornn, and this is the best that Ornn has ever been. I think that he is going to be making day 2 here. The reason why I say that is because he's had a lot of uphill climb to be able to do. I mean, first and foremost, he was kind of like the Aurelia style of build, which was protect the president. You had to make a big guy, and you had to hope that they didn't want to rebuke you and pay, essentially 6 power to be able to get your Ornn back to hand so that they could then win the game. That's the hard part. And, of course, it still happened, and Ornn never necessarily had its day in the sunlight. Ornn is above Wildcard because it does have power behind it. But again, what we've kind of seen with this is while you still have a good amount of power, you have the aggression, you're able to make a lot of gear, you're able to make a really big Ornn still all the same. Thermo Beam is not nearly as much of a meta-relevant card right now. Everyone's going for individual gear destruction. Thermo Beam is a 5 cost, 2 power. That's tough, but if you're able to also just go and like if you're running red, you're blowing up 1 gear, if you're running sabotage, 1 gear, or salvage, 1 gear blown up, kind of thing. Not a whole lot to be able to do with that, and Ornn can survive decently enough with that. So he's in a really good spot. I could even see him breaking into the top 64, though again, I don't think so many people are going to be able to, or are going to be playing him in this case. So that's the thing. I still think that 1 or 2 could potentially break into the top 64 and secure their invite. That's going to be the big thing. But I think also most are still going to where they're like, yeah, I'm going for the metal card, but there's that outlier chance that I am able to still make it into the top 64. I think that's where a lot of Ornn competitors are at this point in the meta. So we'll see. Next, of course, is going to be Jax, and Jax has actually had some really good showings. I do want to put him more towards the wild card, but I still feel like that, yeah, he is going to be in the metal card hunter. These two are kind of at their last leg of it in this case of trying to get those metal cards, and Jax has a decent chance of being able to make day 2. but not by much. He just, had his day in the sun where he was able to make top 8 in Vegas, which was really cool to be able to see. But then at the same time, got kind of hit with the Aphelios rulings where you couldn't blip gear on and off of Aphelios with the legend ability of Jax, and so it just fell to the wayside. And it has a little bit more legs now. It had some good additions added to the deck in Vendetta, but it still isn't going to have the popularity or the power that is needed to be able to, consistently make that day 2, in my opinion, or to even make the top 64. I really hope I'm wrong. I love Jax. He is such a fun legend to be able to pilot. But yeah, we're in a rough spot with that. Now, Aurelia. This is one that I might change in the sense of between the finals and top 8. Aurelia is one that's always been interesting. Finally got its one win over in Australia. And even then, it was under a little bit of controversy for that. Even still, though, Aurelia was the one that was kind of always getting into the top 8, but never actually able to win. That was the sad part. Aurelia would get like 2 or 3 legends into the top 8 by some miracle, like always defying those odds of getting a lot of legends or a lot of her into the top 8, and then would just be taken out right away. And that was it, and that was all that you would be able to see. But Aurelia has made a comeback. She kind of fell to the wayside a little bit in Unleashed, and that was because Master Yi became so popular that +2 that Master Yi was able to utilize when defending and also punch first and things like that, it made it so difficult for Aurelia to be able to win when, a good amount of your field was Master Yi. And so Aurelia fell to the wayside and it had went from a 56, 57, 58% win rate down to a 51, 52. So it was still possible, but not nearly as much as what we saw in Spirit Forge. But all the same, Aurelia still had some really good showings. Still, I think that Aurelia has a good chance to be able to make the finals. But there still is some very much difficulties that we are going to see on this climb in particular. Again, Rek'Sai can be a very good matchup against Aurelia. You have a lot of spell destruction. You have ways to be able to target Aurelia without having to actually pay for the deflect, so you can play Cull the Weak and be able to target Aurelia. It's also made it to where Aurelia has to play Tentacles to be able to avoid those kinds of interactions. And that even weakens Aurelia a little bit, in my opinion, because you're spending 3 energy to be able to defend and try to survive the onslaught of what Rek'Sai is able to bring. Then on top of that, you still have the Falling Stars and the spell removal that you have to worry about at that point. So we'll see what ends up happening, but I think that it is going to be very interesting to see how this all shapes up. Now, Azir. Azir just had a very good win. Rocklow was able to win not the city challenge, what is it called? The new challenges that are able to go. And also Squirtle has always been able to get first place any regional that he's been able, or not any regional that he's been able to enter, but he's been able to win with Azir twice. Does that mean that I think Azir is going to be one of the decks in the finals? Not necessarily, but I think he is, even against these other two, is on the cusp of being able to make it. He is one of the harder decks to pilot because you have to be so calculated in how you play the field and what your opponent has in store and how to calculate all of that out. And it's really interesting to see the ins and outs of Azir. And it feels like it is a, rather boring deck to be able to play. Oh, you just play a gear, you make a unit, you attack in. When you get in trouble, you play out a Rise and it gets you out of trouble and you just win. No, when you actually get into the ins and outs of this deck, it is very much calculated and you have to be very precise on the moves that you end up making here. Azir has some of the best overall match rates of around 50% for every single legend you go against. That is also the thing that makes Azir so difficult to pilot, because you only have a 50% win rate against the entire field. So you have to know how to be able to navigate each match individually. You have to know how to anticipate and theorize what your opponent could be having in hand, how they could respond. You also still have to have some luck in that and trying to find Rises or, having a good mulligan knowledge. I mean, there was the biggest thing I bought Rocklow's guide because I wanted to learn Azir better. And, you know, they're even just how you go through your mulligan is a very big deciding factor on how Azir is going to be able to perform. So that's going to be one of the biggest things. Now, next, we have the rise of Ezreal again. Now, again, Ezreal, I think, is going to be on the tail end of the top 8. I could see Ezreal getting like 9th, 10th, 11th kind of thing, but not necessarily being able to crack into that top 8. We could also see 1. He has had a huge climb. And that's been the interesting part here, because as I've been continuing to watch like the win rates of the legends here, we've been able to see that, like, Diana has actually fallen the most. That even Mel, in some cases, has better win rate percentages than Diana, which is crazy to me. And Ezreal now is coming in and like, hey, by the way, I'm back. I have, the treasure trove type of combos where I'm going to be bouncing things back and forth and things like that. The hardest part about Ezreal, though, is that he does fall to aggro relatively easy, mainly because he needs to get to that late game still to be able to do well. And if he doesn't get to that late game, he is going to struggle. That's going to be the biggest thing here. Now, he still has a really good chance, I think. And that's the hardest part. When Ezreal goes against Diana, it happened at my locals. And oh my gosh, it was such a grind of a match there. And I ended up, finding out that Diana has like a 19% win rate against Ezreal. And yeah, it makes sense. I went against it, and Ezreal was just able to completely shut me down, especially when they find the spirit to be able to just have me discard cards. And there was no coming back from that, and I was just top deck hunting. That sucked. So Ezreal, I still think, is going to have the ability to make top 8, though I would potentially put him in top 64. But I still think that he is going to be so far up there. In this case, I think Draven is too, but I think that he's going to be like 12th and 15th place, give or take, whereas Ezreal has a higher chance, in my opinion, of being able to make that top 8. Now, Renata, that is going to be still a metal card hunter. It's just not that good, and, it sometimes has some legs under it, but you need so much to be able to go right for you to be able to win your game, though, again, this is one of the better spots for Renata to be in. Not going to necessarily spend more time on that. I've been watching a lot of gameplay from a fellow Utahan that's been streaming a lot, Diablo. I forget the rest of his name. But he's been playing Renata, trying to go for the best of metal card in LA. And yeah, the matchups are really rough, and you have to have your card draw go right, but you also have to hope that your opponent's cards go wrong a little bit for you to be able to win your game. So we'll see how that ends up playing out. But all in all, I think I am pretty excited about where Renata is going to stand. And, in this case, I think that, Sivir is in the same boat. Now, there are some theories and some stuff around there. I forget who said it in particular. I think No Veggies potentially might have said it, that they have figured out like a mid-range Sivir. We'll see if that comes to fruition in this case, or if they are going to pick different legends, or what else we are going to be able to see. But like Miracle Sivir was one of my favorite Sivir decks in particular. She was so fun to be able to pilot. And then, of course, Miracle got banned and Sivir fell to the wayside, and that was about it. And then we also had Aurora Sivir, which was one of the most consistent versions and the best versions of Sivir. You were able to protect your Auroras by creating gold pretty much at any time as long as Sivir was readied, and things like that. And yeah, that was the big thing. Now, unfortunately, though, I think that she is going to be back at the metal card hunter phase of this, but that's going to be about it. Next is going to be Fiora, one of my favorites, and she's in a good spot. She's had a lot of good climbs, but still I don't think is in a great spot to be able to make that big impact. Might be able to secure an invite, but I do think it's going to be like maybe 1 or 2 that inch into that top 64, not making it into top 32 in that case. Maybe one outlier being able to crack that top 32, but I don't know. I love Fiora, and Fiora is such a fun deck for me to be able to pilot, but that's the hard part, is she still really seems to struggle here in certain matchups, and while she still has a lot of really good tools in her arsenal, it's just a really tough place for her to be able to be at. That's the hard part. Now, unfortunately, too, I think Jen is back in the metal card hunter phase of this. Not going to necessarily be able to make that top 64. The Jibs run was really cool to be able to see, but unfortunately, That was kind of a bit of an outlier. Jhin was probably one of my favorite hero stories of the Unleashed, being able to think that he was the biggest outlier, and then Jibs just made a master run with his deck list. We also had some Guttural Palace decks that were able to do well, and a couple of Jins were able to make top 64, whereas a lot of people thought, oh yeah, he's just not going to be good. No, not in this case. And Jhin, unfortunately, though, I think is going to be falling to the wayside. He's going to have even less representation than what he already has. And so for him to make day 2, I still think is possible. But all the same, it's going to be a little bit of a long shot. Rengar, finals. Prismaticism's running this. He's already been able to get first without dropping a single game. And on top of that, Rengar, in my opinion, is one of the, if not the best deck of this set. Rengar feels so incredibly good right now, and has great matchups into everything, has good card draw, has good consistency. The +1 with every time that you play a unit is really good. There was even a Rengar play in my tournament yesterday with Starspring. Starspring is the battlefield that allows you to, when you play a unit, you can send one of the other units back to base, and he played Grim Apothecary. Grim Apothecary targeted it itself. Starspring was able to still activate and pushed the Kai'Sa back to base, and so he was able to protect his unit at that point from an attack. And, there's just some really cool plays that Rengar is able to utilize, and he has great matchups into everything, and he's had probably one of the best climbs that I have seen. Unleashed still was able to have some really good situations with, Sam Sherman having a great run with Rengar one time, kind of thing. And then after that, he still really struggled, which was interesting. But Prismaticism figured something out, and this is now the deck that he apparently is going to be piloting. And if he does, it would not surprise me at all if Prismaticism is back in the finals with Rengar. Even on top of that, I think that Rengar is going to have a good chance of being able to crack into that top 8 guaranteed. That's one of the few guarantees that I will say with this. I love where Rengar is at. I think that he is going to be just absolutely amazing in this case, and we will see what ends up happening. Now, Pyke, Vi, Master Yi, XP Yi is going to be in the Metal Card Hunter phase. We're just going to stick that there and call it good. Same with Poppy. At this point, Metal Card Hunter, not going to necessarily have a really good outlier. Might have 1 or 2 be able to make day 2. That's what you hope for when you're Metal Card hunting, because it almost all but ensures that you're going to be able to make it in. Now, Lilia, I think, is going to be in day 2, and I think that she is actually going to be higher up in the day 2. Again, though, she has some really bad matchups, but there are some really fun deck techs that she is able to utilize. She has very much good consistency where no matter what, you're going to at least be able to play a unit out every turn. You don't have to rely on your hand size to be able to have units or things like that. And so Lilia, I think, is in a really good spot right now. Believe that she is going to be able to make day 2. Might maybe be able to crack into the top 64, though I kind of doubt it. But still, the potential is there. But I believe that she is still above wild card, but still under that top 64 threshold. I feel like she is still that mid B tier deck, but still with the right matchups and the right pilot, it can be a big difference maker. Next is going to be Vex. I think Vex is still going to be a wild card here. The big reason why I think Vex is going to be the wild card is going to be because she's never necessarily had her day in the sun. There's some situations that she is able to be a very powerful, prominent deck, but it has an okay legend ability of being able to draw a card when you hold a battlefield. Cool. That's really nice. But for green purple, there's just other color combination, or there's other green purples that just do it better, in that case. And Vex, it feels like you're almost metal card hunting, but I still want to say it's a wild card because the right Vex deck could appear in Vendetta and just absolutely not only be able to make day 2, but really make it into top 64 and really turn some heads. I think that she has probably one of the best possibilities of being able to do that in this tournament tomorrow. So we'll see. With that being said, too, Ivern, I think it has one of the best chances of being able to make day 2 in this case. He was able to get a lot of support, surprisingly, unintentional support of getting cats, poros, and stuff like that in Vendetta to be able to really utilize, and getting some additional yellow cards and things like that. Ivern still struggles, though, on try to attack in. That's going to be one of the biggest things that you are going to be finding issue with. But even, what is it, like the Heron is so dang good, being able to, the second card that you play every turn costing 2 and 2 power less. That's a big cost deficit that you're able to utilize there. And then not only that, you also have the cat, where when it's at a battlefield, you're going to be able to call out a card and your opponent won't be able to play that card unless the cat gets removed. And it's like, oh, by the way, though, I have, tanks here that you have to get through to be able to get to my cat. My cat also gets a +1 because it's in a brush. I can also buff it up with Ivern and stuff, oh my gosh. There's some combo pieces here that Ivern is just going to be so good at being able to take here. And I think it's going to be an absolute blast to see where Ivern ends up going. This could also be one of the few chances that Ivern is able to get potentially top 64. I think that's a bit far-fetched, but this is the best potential that he has to be able to make that top 64. Next is going to be Diana, and Diana is in the top 64 spot. I don't think that she is going to be able to make that top 8. I think it is going to be a bit of a surprise to be able to do so. And I would say the same thing with like Kha'Zix and LeBlanc. LeBlanc has some really good win rates, but also has really been struggling. And I'm going to be curious to see what is going to be happening with LeBlanc in particular, if she is going to be able to make that comeback. I know that Casanova is going to be piloting the LeBlanc. I'm curious to see how he's able to do. But locally, I've been watching LeBlanc being played, and it's still a big struggle. I played against LeBlanc when I've been playing Rengar, and it is such a difficult matchup, and you have so many answers in this case. It's tough. Kha'Zix, though, is one that is in the best place that it has ever been. And even with that, Kha'Zix, with very minimal representation, has been finding himself in the top 16 multiple times and on the cusp of being able to make that top 8. I think that's going to be the same place that Kha'Zix is going to be at again. Being able to get like that 12th to 14th to 16th place hold again. We'll see if he's able to break into the top 8. I think that this is, again, his best chance to be able to do so, but it depends on the representation. I think that Kha'Zix is going to have some of the highest representation here, which is going to be a huge benefit and help to him, but that's going to be the hardest part. Now, we'll see, but it really still would not surprise me if one Kha'Zix ended up breaking through to the top 8. Next is going to be Akali, Metal Card Hunter. It is such a low win rate. It's at around a 30% win rate. Just is really struggling, and it's so sad. Akali, first color of red-green, and it had so much potential, and it felt like that it had footing and was able to move and had some really cool mechanics and things like that. No, it doesn't. Same with Renekton. Not necessarily going to be able to see much there. Same with Ambessa. Not going to be able to see all a ton there. I will still say that like Zed will be a bit of a wild card. I think that he has a good chance to maybe surprise some people, maybe some deck tech that we haven't necessarily seen yet. Could make day 2, could make top 64. Top 64 would be pie in the sky, one of the best dream come true for Zed, in my opinion. He just doesn't have the full amount of support that I've wanted to see with Zed in particular here, which is why I think that he's going to be maybe a little bit of an outlier. Now, Nasus, Susan, I think has a great chance of being able to make that top 64. One of the decks that I thought was going to be that D tier, F tier, actually ended up to get some good legs. The hard part with Nasus is that when you go against the top decks, it is a very difficult win percentage. That's the hardest part. But even with going against those top decks, there are still a good chance that you are able to win out and be able to make it through. All things considered, I think that Nasus is going to be in the middle of like the top 64, potentially making it into like the top 32 to top 24 in that whereabouts. If they had just an absolute god run, maybe one gets into the top 8, though I think that is going to be relatively rare. Next, of course, is going to be Shin, Metal Card Hunting. There is not even a chance for it to be necessarily making it into the wild card. I just don't think that it's going to be there. Jace, on the other hand, I think that it could be a good chance of making day 2. There are some consistencies that it's able to utilize with creating sprites, with having good spell calls, still some decent draw power, while also being Aurora to get your Elder Dragons out. That's going to be the hardest part, and sometimes really you only need to find one Elder Dragon to be able to have that tide turn in this case. We'll see. I'm going to be curious to see what Jace is able to do, but again, he's on the tail end. I would really keep him at the wild card, but I keep watching gameplay from Tron is bad and seeing what he is able to do with the deck itself, and I still think that it has a great chance of being able to make that day 2, though outside of that, it's going to be a bit of a climb. I don't know if it's going to be able to secure an invite, but still, that medal card, especially, oh my gosh, that regional champion medal card is going to look so good. That alt art Jace, that's going to be really cool to see. Anyway, with that being said, Mel, I think, is still going to be able to make day 2, but top 64, I don't know yet. And the reason why I don't know is because I am getting so many mixed feedbacks about Mel, where Mel is really good, but Mel is also really struggling, but Mel has won and done really well in this online tournament, but Mel has really struggled in this paper tournament, and you know. I think what's going to really come down to this is what Mel is going to be able to do with the pilots that are piloting her. If Alan ZQ ends up making it into Mel and actually committing to it, again, I don't know if he is. I feel like it could be more of a deflection, and then he's going to actually pick something else, go back to Ezreal. That would be something, that'd be a plot twist that I would be all for. Because I don't know. He keeps announcing that he's going for Mel, but I'd be surprised. I hope I'm wrong about that. It'd be really cool to see him on Mel, and if we are on Mel, then with Alan ZQ, he has a good chance of probably making top 8. If not, he'd be getting top 16. But still, I think that Mel will be able to secure top 64. It's going to be due to pilot skill. Mel still has a little bit of the shortcomings here, and especially with being able to add -2, but only when your legend is empowered and only during your turn, is a bit of a shackle that you have to break through. It's not as good of a scenario that you would want. If you could add -2 to a unit during a showdown on your opponent's turn, then Mel would be up there. I would even be arguing that Mel would be potentially one of those top 8s, if not like 9th, 10th, or 11th at that point. But unfortunately, yeah, there's just some shortcomings that like Ezreal is in a better spot in, or even like Diana has a better legend ability that is able to just be more efficiently utilized. And I think that's going to be the big difference. Next, I think, is going to be Kennen. And Kennen, I think, is going to have a good chance of being like the new Aurelia, where you're going to be seeing like 3 Kennens that are going to be in the top 8. It is going to be the most represented deck, in my opinion, and it has some really crazy win rates. In one tournament, it had a 62% win rate. In another tournament, 58. In another, 59, and things like that. And Kennen just has the consistency. He is as close to the miracle decks as what we have had in the past. Meaning that even if he gets a really bad mulligan, he can make a bad hand great. That's the insane part. And so, if you, like, there's been times where I don't have a single 2-drop. Oh, but I have a stack deck. I go stack deck into Lightning Rush. Oh, there's a Nocturne K while I'm back in the game with a 4-might unit on the board turn 1. You know, oh, cool. Well, here I go. I'm going to be going in, and I dig through my entire deck, and turn 5, I go Rasa Nocturne in a turn, kind of thing. And, oh, you got rid of that? All right, that's fine. I'm going to play my Morbid Return to be able to get that card back. I'm going to play Shovel to be able to conquer here, to be able to play back out a Rasa, which is going to be a 6-might. I'm only going to pay a power for that. There's a consistency with Kennen that is just so difficult to be able to contest. The biggest thing, though, is you're hoping that Kennen doesn't find his Nocturnes early game. If he has his small units early game and he's not able to find like his Nocturnes and his Rasas into that mid to late game, then you also have a good chance of being able to take it. If they don't see Ride the Wind, you have a good chance to be able to take it. There are still some scenarios that Kennen can really struggle into. He is also very linear. What you see is what you get. You're not going to be able to, see a 6-might Rasa and it's going to be going up to 20 might. You know, you could see that with like Master Yi or with Rengar or things like that. It's some stuff that you have to be very careful about and how to play around. But you know, that's the nice part. What you see is what you get with that. Now, yeah, you still have to worry about like Fizz and Starcross and things like that. Okay, that's fine. We'll be able to play around that kind of stuff. And, you know, it'll be interesting because I think those who are able to make it into the top 8 are going to be able to be prepared for the Kennen matchup. It's probably going to be one of the matchups that they're playing against the most because they know that if they're able to make day 2, Kennen's going to be probably one of the number 1 matchups that they are going to be going against. And that could be really where Kennen begins to struggle. People who are running Aurelia, Rek'Sai, Azir, Ezreal, Rengar, you know, really anything in the top 64, I guarantee you, if they're preparing for this, the number 1 deck they are going against is Kennen. So we'll see. And I really do think that this is pretty accurate to where the best chances of making it to the finals, I would say, would be Rengar, Kennen, Azir, and Rek'Sai with Diana and Ezreal behind that. I still feel like that, Aurelia, not Diana, Aurelia. I still feel like that Aurelia is in a great place, but still, I don't know. Is it enough to be able to win? Yes, but I still feel like it's a much longer shot than what we're seeing with like Rengar, Kennen, Azir, or Rek'Sai. So with that being said, guys, that's the list. Let me know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. What changes would you make? Call me out where you think I'm wrong, and applaud me when you think I'm right. I don't know. Whatever. With that being said, though, guys, that's going to be it for now. Oh, man, I can't wait. Barcelona is going to be an absolute blast. Can't wait to see what is in store for us. And with that being said, guys, have a good one.